me tell you about a friend. It's Craig LeBlanc where the good times never end. Talking Parks and Rec, it's a show you gotta know. Welcome one and all to the Daily Parks and Rec Show. It's the Daily Parks and Rec Show.
One of the standouts that came out of our survey is our community wants us to lean into community events. They want us to continue to maintain what we have, and they want us to expand access to trails. Like, those were the top three. What are we going to do to continue to maintain this park system that we already have? Right behind those three was maintaining the pace of growth. Our community is pretty unique that we've been hitting 3.5% to 4% growth annually for the last 20 years. So we are now hitting the point where our compound interest, as it relates to populations, are really starting to be felt in the community.
Welcome to the Daily Parks and Rec Show. Today, we're diving into the incredible offerings of Post Falls Parks and Recreation, where nature, community, and adventure come together in the most exciting ways. Post Falls is a playground for everyone, with 36 parks spanning more than 900 acres and 38 miles of scenic trails for walking, biking, and exploring. There's something for all ages, including 3 splash pads, 16 children's playgrounds, and an impressive 112 climbing routes. Here's a quick look at the incredible programs and events happening year-round. Camp Kami Lim, a fun, safe outdoor camp experience for kids, running strong since 1995. Community events. Enjoy citywide favorites like Winterfest, movies in the park, and summer concerts. Post Falls Festival, flagship summer celebration in July, full of food, fun, music, and community spirit. Post Falls Sprint Triathlon, a thrilling event for athletes of all levels, featuring swimming, biking, and running. Sports leagues and programs. Stay active with organized leagues and schedules for youth and adult sports. Whether you're seeking adventure, connection, or just a beautiful place to unwind, Post Falls Parks and Recreation offers a world of opportunities to play, grow, and belong. And today, we're excited to welcome Bryan Myers, the passionate Parks and Recreation Director. He's here to give us a behind-the-scenes look at how his team is building a stronger, more inclusive community. Let's jump in. All right, we are live here. This is Craig LeBlanc with the Daily Parks and Rec Show. Our 100th episode, so it's been quite a journey, and we have a really special guest, Bryan Myers, that's got a great background that's just going to have so much good content. It's going to be nearly impossible to cram it all into one episode. So we may have to have you back, especially on the maintenance series. But how are you doing today, Bryan?
Very well. Congratulations on your 100th episode, Craig.
Yeah, this has been quite a journey. We were discussing before the show all the different talents that are working full time at this project. It's probably 200 man hours a week, 4 of us putting in 40, 50, some of us 60 hours a week. And it's amazing when you have specialists working with you that can edit videos and know when to post and how to work all these new AI tools that are changing every second. But so Bryan's up in Idaho, Post Falls, and he has a background in landscape architect. And I love to have these people that come into Parks and Rec with a totally different background, and then how that is used and how that helps them in Parks and Recreation. So, Bryan, maybe you could take us back to those landscape architect days. Kind of what were you thinking back then? What was your day to day? And, in what capacity did you use that degree?
Sure. Yeah. So, kind of stumbled into the industry. Originally started out to be a secondary education major in mathematics and biology. So kind of some well-rounded sciences. And through that process, while I was going to school, I ran a landscape company myself here in northern Idaho, and drove 90 miles back and forth to college a couple times a week to keep the business afloat while going to school. And somewhere along the way, it became clear that I wasn't going to make as much money as a teacher as I was making running the landscape business. So charged headlong into the landscape business. Fast forward about 10 years, a local Little League group reached out to me to do some volunteer work on a baseball complex. Jumped in the middle of that, did big renovations for them to get ready for a tournament, and I realized I've got to find a way back into my passion of baseball. And so shortly after that, went to a sports turf managers conference in Seattle, enjoyed that experience, and somehow landed as a parks worker in Post Falls.
Nice.
And, 3 years later, finished up my bachelor's degree actually in organizational sciences. So organizational leadership, psychology, leveraging that psychology part of the education curriculum that you get as a
yeah. Oh, and I can't wait to talk more and more about that. Maybe just I'd like to dig a little deeper on, maybe define what a landscape architect is. How do they approach an open space, or how do they approach design?
Sure. So I don't have a formal landscape architecture degree. I was on the design side as an informal basis.
I see.
We do have a landscape architect in-house as a part of our team.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes. And I think the placemaking, the research, the getting to know the site is really where that core comes in. And part of getting to know the site is getting to know the community that surrounds it, the community that's going to be using it. Yeah. And really getting to see the space in 3 dimensions. And then I had one colleague that shared with me that landscape architecture is art is 3-dimensional, right? But landscape architecture is art with the 4th dimension of time. Nice. You're also laying this space out as something that will be. It's not necessarily what you're actually drawing on paper at the time of construction. It's taking into consideration the way this is going to age and the way it's going to last as a community, and it begins to use it and the like.
Now, tell me more about the degree that you did pursue. You said it was organizational. What was that last part?
Organizational sciences. So it's an arm of organizational psychology or organizational leadership. Really just focused in on what makes organizations tick, what's at the heart of them, what keeps people interacting well together, and how do organizations lean into their purpose. And typically master planning process, you start out with a SWOT analysis and then dive into those and break it down into organization or measurable steps and goals. And that's coming out of that organizational psychology, organizational sciences degree field, where you learn to put the math behind all of those steps. So how do you go out and survey a community? How do you find an analysis of whether or not this is a statistically valid survey? What does that sample size look like? That's the core of what that degree program leads into. The how we create these master planning documents that we go out and exercise on a periodic basis to keep our organizations reflecting our community.
Right. So organizational, I guess, psychology, I guess, is that similar to studying how groups of people move and think together, which is a lot different than maybe the individual or even like a relationship with an individual? It kind of grows into something larger than just a family, but maybe like you're working with a group of people focused on some purpose, in this case, parks and recreation. So what are some kind of, I guess, 101 points that you could share with people that aren't familiar with organizational psychology?
Yes, you're right on the line of where that sits, and group dynamics. It's something that anytime you work in leadership for any length of time, you start to see the personalities that start to fit into the mold that really every organization has. That you have to find the strengths and weaknesses, and your job as a leader is to put the person that's on your team in the right seat on the bus to offer the best possible outcome for the mission that you're trying to achieve. And the organizational sciences, the arm that I was studying, leaned into how do you really measure all of that?
Right.
And, that lent itself to that mathematic background that I originally started out with, and was able to leverage a little bit of that. Now with the tools that are available, so much of that math and the it just happens automatically. You just really need to understand the foundations of why it's going that way and be able to articulate that, yes, what we did, even though we only had 500 responses for this community of 50,000 people, it's still valid. And to be able to explain that, the meaning or the purpose behind the survey that we did, I think that's some of the strength that program has offered coming into this role, that maybe outside of the traditional park and recreation and outdoor leadership, recreation management type track that you get at a university system.
Yeah, and so what are some of the key metrics or the things that you would want to measure when you talk about the math? What's some of the data you want to try to go get so that you can make sure that your measurements are accurate and correct? And maybe even give an example of how that plays out if you're trying to get, I don't know, how would we use this? Maybe buy-in from all the stakeholders or people that use the park, make sure they're building the park they want, not the park that you think they want, kind of thing.
Sure.
Is that?
Yeah, so, I mean, like our master plan process, we went through 2019, so that made it a little interesting. We wrapped it up in March or April of 2020, which is really tough to try to get the last bow on a community master plan when you're really rolling out this document that's going to create the vision for how our recreation spaces are going to be shaped over the next decade. We were trying to do that all in a virtual environment for the first time. And typically we would have rolled that sort of thing out with an ice cream social and had people out at the City Hall Plaza and made a big show of it. And we ended up having to be kind of a soft rollout to just our council and the steering group that we had. So that whole process, we kicked that off with info gathering, where we had a consultant that came in and interviewed stakeholders, staff, city council, and other community members that are influential and have a big stake in the processes that we offer, or the elements that we offer to the community. And from there, that informed a community survey that went out to a sample size that was determined to be statistically valid, to receive information back that this is the overall direction of where the community would have us go. And so it's pretty standard questions, just what demographic information and that sort of thing. And really what those are there for is to check back. Did we survey a sample that reflects the overall demographics of our community and the different portions of the community? So we lean into our transportation zones of population. It's census tract data, and you're looking at that individual census tract data to determine, did we get a sample from that individual area that reflects the demographic of that makeup of that community. And then, overall, where do they want us to go with that? And one of the standouts that came out of our survey is our community wants us to lean into community events, and they want us to continue to maintain what we have, and they want us to expand access to trails. Like, those were the top three, with maintaining what we have being number one. So me as the manager, that gives me some marching orders. What are we going to do to continue to maintain this park system that we already have to meet the needs of the community? Right behind those three was maintaining the pace of growth. Our community is pretty unique, that we've been hitting 3.5% to 4% growth annually for the last 20 years. So we are now hitting the point where the power of compound interest as it relates to populations are really starting to be felt within the community.
That's pretty rapid, isn't it?
It is extremely rapid.
What's causing that? Are y'all just siphoning off from a larger city, or is it just any idea what's causing this?
It's immigration from elsewhere outside of the state. The whole state is growing at over 2%. The population centers.
So it's new people, not just. Are y'all just having a bunch of babies in the city? Is there something?
No, it's new people. Yeah, the new people may be having babies, but it's new people. And for a long time, we were thought to be a retirement community. And one of the things that stood out in that survey was that maybe we aren't as much of a retirement community as we once thought. We're
Mm.
kind of hitting both tiers of. We're hitting the young families, the starting home families, and we do have that aging population as well in our community. And we're kind of missing the middle-aged, 40s to 50s. We have a smaller sample of those folks in our community than other parts of our state. So those all help us inform programs that we offer, the nature of the programs we offer. A program that lends itself to a senior population is going to be different than something that lends itself to the young family population.
Right.
And our community, to service the whole, is going to require both of those things. And then,
Now, tell me more about your trails. There seems to be a lot of interest in that from your community. Is that something y'all have already had and they just want to keep it going? They want to expand it? What are y'all kind of thinking around the trail? And what type of trails do y'all have? Is this kind of wide bicycle, old railroad tracks, or is it kind of completely? So we have trails over here in Baton Rouge, one of the cities I'm in, where we have both bicycle, cement, but then we have some that are literally just running through the woods, and they just kind of, if there's a mud hole, they'll put a little bridge, but aside from that, it's just dirt path, maybe some gravel here and there.
Yeah.
What do y'all have?
Yeah, so we're in the inland Northwest, and we have quite a bit of access to federal ground. So I think that is one of the dynamics that draws people to the region. The state of Idaho is nearly 50% federally owned. And so there's ample space that's outside of our community, but we offer within our community some nearby recreation that you might consider in state land or federal land elsewhere.
I see.
And we offer, yes, the multimodal trails that are adjacent to a road around a perimeter of a neighborhood. And we're active in managing that transportation network, because really where that fits into is, here's a volume of the roadway, and we're going to put this path along this volume of the roadway. And it kind of comes into our community planning with that growth dynamic that we've got. We have the ability to inform the new subdivision standards to further those trail connectivity efforts. So that's one. And then two, we've got regional trail hubs that really connect all of those together. And I'd like to think of what we call our Centennial Trail. It was built during Idaho's Centennial, 1990, and it stretches from the Washington state border 28 miles into the state, goes through 3 different communities. And that trail then connects to 2 other regional trails that are along the shoulders of state highways. Those are 12 to 14 foot wide asphalt paved trails, and they really serve as what I like to think of as the backbone to our multimodal trail network regionally. Once you get across the border into Washington, that trail then continues another 50 some miles.
Oh, wow.
Into Washington through the city of Spokane.
Unbroken? It's literally just a trail that's passing through 3 communities and continues on into the state of Washington?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And when I first started back at the city, I was a part of a project that provided some lighting, put a logo across an old train trestle that crossed the Spokane River that sits between our 2 communities, or between our 2 states, and really creates the entryway to this northern Idaho. So big logo across this train trestle, North Idaho Centennial Trail. And that project started in 1990. The then Parks and Rec director, Doug Eastwood and Coeur d'Alene, and then my boss, the director here in Post Falls, those 2 were instrumental in bringing that project together. But Doug has wrote a book on the trail that almost wasn't. That all the hurdles that were required to get that project through at that point in time. And it's been the backbone and the linchpin for our community's identity with trails and multimodal type activities. My boss loves to tell a story of a factory outlet mall that was built up right next to the Centennial Trail. He walked into it one day and was talking with the store owner, and they said, it's strange. We actually are the number one, it was like a Foot Locker, number one seller of rollerblades in the nation. And he's like, do you think it has anything to do with the trail that's right behind you? And the guy's like, no, I don't think so. And it's those sorts of stories that I think is really instrumental in telling what it is we offer the community.
Right.
That we are beyond these outdoor recreation pieces. Like, we help drive local business with the facilities that are out there, and it's the larger recreation group. They've started to tell that story. Hunting in the West, the percentage of use tax basically that gets transferred on to managing wildlife populations. Those things are out there, and those stories are being told, but not necessarily at our local level. So
yeah, I can't believe, so 100th episode, I've probably interviewed close to 300 people, and this is the first in-depth discussion I've had about trails. And I'm starting to think of all the trails that run through both of the cities I've lived in, actually all three of the cities, and how we've got one of them in New Orleans. Same thing, it passes right behind a grocery store, and it is like Grand Central Station, and it's causing traffic jams. There's so many people walking on a sunny day, and from everything from scooters to bikes to rollerblades to walkers and runners. And you think there was a scheduled race on this one, because it's an old railroad track and it's just super densely populated. But, for those that are, developing trails, what are some of the things to consider when developing a trail throughout your community?
Yeah, I think that the thing that's standing out now is the use patterns are starting to shift, and it's really tough as an administrator or planner to think through what those volumes are going to be with the onset of electric bicycles and electric scooters, one wheels. The way people are moving in that environment is entirely new. And it used to be that we'd hear complaints of the triathlon training individual that was just bombing through a trail section at 20 some miles an hour, and that was going to kill people. Now we're hearing that same thing about e-bikes. And it's kind of a lagging study that we're starting to hear the complaints and starting to hear that there's a need to address that type of activity in these spaces, because part of what we do as facility operators is trying to manage out conflict. Like, if you can design a facility to reduce the amount of conflict, you've been successful.
Right.
And now with this new use, how do we do that? We picked up a car in our neighboring community for maintenance, and we jumped back on the freeway, and I'm watching e-bikes that are crossing the trail profile, jumping the trail like it's a tabletop. That's not something we ever thought about before. So, it used to be, you put a trail in, people are going to ride on the asphalt trail, but now they're able to ride this trail profile like it's a moto track.
Wow.
So we're really having to step back and look at how we are designing environments that can reduce that level of conflict. You don't ever want to have a trail that has a major thoroughfare coming at 90 degrees to what's happening that way. So those are some of the challenges that I don't necessarily have the answers for yet, but need to be considered. And then volume, planning for the volumes of what your community is going to be. One of the dynamics, like I said, we've been growing at this 3 to 4%. So we had trails that were built at 10 foot wide, 12 foot wide, that are now starting to see capacity challenges similar to what you're describing behind the grocery store. So trying to forecast how much volume we're going to have of bike traffic or other types of traffic on this facility, and drawing that into your design plan.
Yeah.
So it can serve as the network. And then intersections, some of the little subtle things. Intersections are where people are going to gather to get to another destination, and designing that so that it can handle the traffic at that location. Once upon a time, our trail network would neck down to a small 5 foot wide intersection because it was the only thing that was a need at that point. Now we're designing our intersections to be at least full trail width, or maybe wider. Because
what's considered full trail width?
The full trail profile. So 10 foot, 12 foot, 14 foot of asphalt. We're designing that facility so that as it approaches the crossing road, it's that full 12 plus feet wide as it travels across the cross street or whatever.
And I noticed, so we've got big parks, and so you've got trails inside of parks, and really it's just like a closed circuit. But now I'm starting to see more and more of these they're like used for transportation. Like people are actually getting on a trail to go do something in the city. They're not just showing up at a park in a car, getting out and walking the trail, getting back in their car. They're actually taking it from point A to point B. And some of these are set up to look almost like mini roads without cars. But
Yep.
you're starting to see the whole, like you said, the whole gamut of the big rubber wheel that you kind of balance on. You've seen a bunch of those, and then you've got the e-bikes and the e-scooters, and then plus all the walkers, runners, dog walkers, stuff like that. What are some of the problems that y'all are seeing with these new forms of transportation, and then also people using it as a transportation circuit, not necessarily as a exercise loop inside of a park?
Yeah, exactly that. It's just a volume thing once again. The more individuals, if you had one individual on one of those big wide bikes traveling 30 miles an hour, it wouldn't impact anything hardly. But when you mix all of those different types of uses in that single facility and it's dense, now you start to create additional
Conflict.
And the cycle track design where you've got basically a bike road
Right.
within a road, that is a way of managing that. You're putting this type of use in this space, the vehicle use in another space, and pedestrian use on sidewalk adjacent to it all. And it's as we see more and more folks using that type of mode of transportation, the need for expanding those kinds of facilities is becoming more apparent. And there are concerns with the various use, but the other thing that I try to bring myself to is the discussion of where's the safest place for this type of activity for this human to be operating in. Is it in the roadway? Because we want to push the motorized vehicle to the roadway. Is that the safest location for them and the motorist, or is the safest location for them in this multi-use path of the cycle track or bike lane or whatever it might be? And really evaluating that holistically and trying to describe that to the community, because that is meeting resistance for sure.
Yeah.
So those are some of the challenges that I'm seeing pop up, and just trying to message that this is really truly the safest place for everybody for these types of activities to occur.
Yeah.
The commuter path, linear parkways lend themselves to handling that kind of traffic quite well. Knowing that their traffic flows are greater than what they had been with other things, there's design constraints and design considerations that are brought into how do they approach that road intersection. So
right. Yeah, and I can tell you, we were going down St. Charles Street in New Orleans. If you haven't been, it's one of the prettiest streets in America. But they have like the streetcar, and then they have like cars, and then they have this bike lane, and then they have like park car, and then they have sidewalk over there. And when you're driving down it, there's people on bikes all the time. You don't think much of it. You're like, okay, let me just not hit the guy. But if you're one of the guys on the bike, you think you're going to die all the time. So it's kind of sketchy. I actually rode my bike several times on that one. I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to take my life into my hands, because sometimes these cars come flying by you. But at the same time, the sidewalk is so many bumps and ups and down. It's like, hard on your suspension, especially if your suspension is like your elbows and knees. Can give out on you. All right, so let's maybe shift gears into urban. Actually, wait, I'm going to take this moment before we get too far. I want to let's see. I'm going to play the one that Chris made for social media management. So one of the ways you can support the channel is if you're having trouble managing your social media, not because you're not capturing the event, or not because you don't have a good festival that you want to promote, but just because you don't have an editor, all the technical skills, the softwares, the subscriptions that you need to sign up for, so that you can have the proper tools to run social media campaigns and to raise awareness of a bike trail that you're developing or anything at all. And so for as little as $100 a week, you can work with our team. And now, we did not think this was how we were going to fund part of this show, but it just turns out that when you're trying to grow a media company, you have to get this stuff onboarded. And there is a need for a lot of communities to just have assistance in social media management. So if this is something that maybe we can help you out with, 100% of the money we make from this goes back into growing this media company for the community. So I'll go ahead and play this one little 2-minute clip, and then we'll come back and talk about urban forestry with Bryan. Thanks.
Good day, Parks and Rec fans. Welcome to the Daily Parks and Rec Show.
Across the country, parks and recreation departments work hard to build thriving community spaces. But what if no one knows about them? Without the right promotion in this digital age, incredible parks, programs, and events go unnoticed. And that means missed opportunities for families, communities, and local businesses. That's where the Daily Parks and Recreation Show team comes in. We specialize in high-quality promotional videos tailored to promote your local park and recreation areas. Expert social media management to boost online presence and engagements, and tailored marketing strategies for promoting events designed specifically for parks and rec departments. We don't just create videos, we tell stories that inspire, engage, and bring communities together. By working with us, your department doesn't just get professional social media marketing support. You become part of a bigger movement, showcasing the vital role of Parks and Rec across the nation.
Perseverance is critical to improving. It's just don't quit, don't give up, keep pushing. Especially in these park systems, park directors are constantly bombarded with things that they need to overcome and achieve with limited resources, limited staff. And perseverance is definitely in the job description of anyone in Parks and Rec. So like Julie Angie said, perseverance is failing 19 times and succeeding the 20th.
Boost your visibility, engage your community, amplify your impact. Let's make Parks and Rec the heartbeat of every city. Message us today and let's start telling your story.
All right. So if we can help you out with that, help fund the channel. The general concept there is that 1 hour of us working with you is equivalent to about 4 hours of you handing this over to somebody as one of the hats they wear, because it's, when you have all the tools and a specialist, you can really do cover a lot of ground. And so we typically work part-time with the staff, and that way your staff can focus on stuff that you have to physically be present, running a trail, running an event, running a festival, or planting trees. So let's go into urban forestry. Now you're a certified arborist, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I've been a certified arborist now for a little over.
And what does that entail?
A decade and a half, I guess. So,
a decade and a half?
Yeah. And then since then, I've secondarily earned my tree risk assessment qualification. So those are the two urban forestry related certifications that I've managed to earn along the way and maintain. So those are both through the International Society of Arboriculture, ISA, and really are the benchmark for education and training in the tree care industry.
Can you define that? Like what is, to someone that knows nothing about it aside from it's the science of trees, or how do you define it to the person that's kind of an outsider?
Yeah. So arboriculture is the maintenance and care of trees, the science of trees on an individual basis. Urban forestry then expands that individual care where that's a part of it, but it also goes out to the population of trees within a community. And then forestry, traditional forestry, would be a population of trees in a forested environment that are generally being used for an agricultural purpose. So those are kind of the three buckets that me as a parks manager, I fit into all three of those. We're caring for individual tree species or individual trees at the time of planting, maintenance treatments, end of life removal, storm response. So on that basis, we need to know how to properly plant, how to properly prune, how do you identify which is the right tree to plant in this location, where a conflict is going to occur with other uses and utilities, that sort of thing. So we're looking at that individual basis, but we're also looking at the larger community basis, sort of ensuring that we've got species diversity over individual neighborhoods and throughout the community, so that we don't have community that we're setting up for failure with a future pest that may emerge.
Mm.
And then in the forest environment, we do have the non-paved trail systems. Our community has a 500-acre community forest that has 15, 16 acres of or 15 to 16 miles of natural surface trail that weeds throughout that provides access to a river and rock climbing opportunities. And within that, we're then handling more traditional forestry while still managing for those recreation uses. And at that location, some other non-traditional forestry uses where eventually that site will be used to leverage our community wastewater, treated effluent that will then be land applied to that community forest to use the natural biological process of these individual trees to transpire the water into the atmosphere and uptake nutrients for plant growth.
Now, how important is it?
Things in the river. So all pretty cool project that we can probably touch base on at another point in time. That's a topic itself. But so those are the roles of an urban forester, which is under the helm of my day-to-day responsibility. So it helps having that general familiarity as a parks manager to understand the trees on the basic individual basis, and then be able to articulate and understand the conversations that occur from our actual urban forester, the folks that have been in that field for their career.
Mm. How important is it to know the species that do well? I know a lot of times we'll go to a park system in another community or across the country, and we're like, oh, I love these trees. And you go try to plant those trees in your place, and it's just not going to work well because maybe give us a little insight as to the importance of knowing the species that do well in the environment.
Yeah, it not only doing well in that individual environment, there's for sure the need to ensure that a tree is survivable in the climate that you have, right? We're not going to have palm trees in northern Idaho.
Right.
That's not a thing that there's one palm tree, a hardy banana palm, that I think is marginally zoned in our community. And I joke that we should plant it somewhere, but you're going to have problems. Like we try to plant that tree here, and we're going to have pest-related problems with that tree because it's marginal for growing in this environment. The trees that are native to an area already have their own set of challenges to continue to thrive. Now you take something that's marginal in that environment, you've just added to that dynamic. So yes, that's at the start, that's the first thing you have to consider. Then secondarily, you have to think of, again, those site considerations. Like we talked about, getting to know an individual site from a park development standpoint. What other infrastructure happens to be where I might want to plant this tree? Do I have power lines above? Do I have utility lines underneath? Do I have a water line underneath? Do I have a stormwater outlet that is going to be nearby? Do I have some other disturbance that will likely happen over the life of this tree? That's really hard to think through when you're talking a 80 to 100 year time frame for this tree to be planted. But as an administrator of a full urban forest, we have to think of those potential conflict points as we're moving forward, so that we're not spending $700 to $1,000 or more of the community's resource to plant a tree that then will become a problem 15, 20 years down the road for us.
Right.
And so right tree, right place, so the right tree is that zoning, proper tree for the environment that you're in. And then secondarily, the right place, that we're planting a tree that won't grow to a 80-foot maturity height underneath the power line. And those things become critical. And fortunately, in our community, our old portion of town had a large number of our native pine stand still intact. And that's the portion of the community that I was able to grow up in. And the forest sites still are intact that way. And they're thriving still for the most part. There's conflicts that happen from time to time. The trees probably are now nearing that 80 to 100 year range where they're hitting end of life, and replanting is starting to happen. But for the most part, our community forest is rather young. We've been growing at that 3 to 4% growth rate for that last 20 years or so. So our community's had the opportunity. Our Urban Forestry Commission was formed 27 years ago, I believe. And we have one individual that has been on that community board the entire time.
Wow.
Our parks construction manager, his late father-in-law, was our original community forester, had a long career with the U.S. Forest Service, actually was an undersecretary in Washington, and retired here and started our community forest. So our arboretum was largely planted by his efforts that borders the interstate freeway that comes through the middle of our town. So our legacy of urban forestry managed in a more modern sense really stems from his efforts and is front and center. It's at our main street community off ramp from the interstate highway system is where our arboretum sits currently. And with that, that growth has resulted in the ability to really do exactly what you've described with putting the right tree in the right place as this community has grown. So 20 to 30 years ago is when this all started. We started being able to plant right tree, right place, and in an environment that is generally pretty friendly for tree growth. Most of our city stormwater has been able to be built into vegetated grassy swales alongside of the roadway. Great place for a tree to grow for the most part, and reduces some of the conflicts that you'd have with roadways in a more urbanized hardscape type setting.
Right.
And we've had the luxury of learning from that first 10 or 15 years of planting to identify some of the problems, work with city leadership and community development to develop code and design standards, to work with the development community to help offset some of the potential problems that may exist if we don't correct that. And with that, trees are being installed, and then our team is being really active in managing the early ages of these trees. We're setting a preventative maintenance work order to come back and prune trees that were installed inside of the first 2 years. So we can correct some of the potential structural deficiencies that could exist if that pruning task wasn't completed. And then again, that we're putting our entire community, we've gone through and mapped out individual zones that generally have a similar population of trees within each zone. And with that map, we're trying to set up a routine cycle of being able to go through and treat individual zones on a 5-year basis. So that gives us a touch point on these rather new trees for once every 5 years. And we're hoping to hit that kind of a cycle for the first 20 years of the tree's life. At that point, the tree is largely trained in the way it will grow and is hopefully set up for some good success of not having deficiencies that could exist within the canopy of the tree that would likely lead to failure and storm problems, response need by the community when storms occur. So that's kind of our approach to it. And I've got a wonderful urban forester that's really led that charge and has done quite well in assembling a team that is doing that great work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'd love to get him on the show, especially on that maintenance show, because I think urban forestry would fit well in what it takes to maintain not just the facilities, but trails and urban forests that we have to plant and maintain. And so you're saying that after you plant a tree, you need to be there around the 2-year cycle, and then at year 5, 10, 15, 20-year mark. And so that's kind of the first 20 years to kind of train the tree and care for the tree as preventative maintenance. So you head off an issue, which could shorten the life, kill it, something like that, or make it more of a problem. Did I represent that correctly?
Exactly. That's kind of the ideal scenario. We don't live in an ideal world. So you set your best plan and you go after it. And
how many trees are y'all maintaining at this rate?
I believe we have.
You got a head count yet?
I think we're about 18,000 trees in our community. the number that sticks in my head is what it was when I first started with 16,000, but we're well over 500 to 700 additional trees being planted annually at this point.
Wow.
And
And
those are largely being planted by developers. So
Yeah.
that's a cost of development that's borne by new growth. So growth paying for itself is one of the mantras from our city leadership. And
And so how long does it take to hit a tree like that, as far as let's say you're one of the 18,000 trees and you're at your 2-year mark? Is that like a 1 hour stop, or you're just kind of pruning a little? I'm trying to think of the manpower and the hours that it takes per tree times 18,000.
so our urban forestry crew includes that urban forester as the supervisor manager of that program, and 2 field staff.
Mm.
So that's the scale of what we're able to achieve. Our
Wow.
natural areas, trails, we have 1 full-time employee and 1 6-month seasonal that actually historically has been somebody that joins 6 months with us and 6 months with the neighboring community as a seasonal staff there. We've been able to find a pretty good working relationship with another urban forestry division in a larger city nearby. And that's been a great working relationship, so that somebody can stay gainfully employed year round, and leverage the same skill set in both places.
What do you do? So what are you showing up with? What do you do? Or is it just a pickup truck and maybe some pruning shears? Do y'all do any mulch on some of these? What's kind of the game plan when you show up at a site?
Yep, for those maintenance pruning cycles, it's largely small bucket truck because once again we're rather young community forest. We don't need a big 70-foot bucket truck with a skid steer behind it to load out blocks of wood that are being pruned off of a tree. We're more we're trying to prune things when they're less than 2 inches in diameter. So we're able to go through with hand saws, chainsaw, small pruning chainsaw, pull saw, pull clip are the tools that are in our routine. The bucket truck unit that we have is 5,500, 1.5 ton truck chassis with a dump box and a center mounted pedestal lift. So they have the ability to go aloft if needed. They have all their trip climbing gear outfitted on that truck, that they can climb a tree safely if needed there as well. And roadside safety signage, conage, lights on the back of the truck. Those are the sorts of things that are.
Does it drag a chipper box, a thing that chips the branches?
It does, yeah. We do have a 8 to 10 inch chipper that is being behind that.
Oh wow! So this is kind of my language. I used to have many bucket trucks with electricians on them. There were times where the city. I remember when I was little, city of Port Allen. Shout out to Mr. Barry Brewer if he's still alive out there. He should be. But he said, "Hey, we need y'all to come prune all these live oaks throughout this oak subdivision." And man, that was some work.
Yeah.
And we just had the bucket truck for the city. We changed out a bunch of their lights, and but that's a full on tree company essentially that you're having within your department. I mean, you just named all the stuff that a tree company would have, from the bucket truck, the chainsaws, the tree surgeons is what we used to call them, the climbing gear, the safety gear, and then all the chipper boxes and that goes along with it.
Yeah, we do have a grapple bucket stand-on unit. We have a small mini excavator that assists with planting and trail projects for the natural area trail system. So that's the equipment that is offered to that division. And I have to really give props to our city leadership that they have been active in investing in quality equipment for our crews to be as effective and efficient as possible. I don't know that that's necessarily uniform throughout communities of our size, but they really have done a good job of using one-time monies to invest in those sorts of technologies versus investing in one-time monies and staff that now you're building a balloon that's about to pop.
Right.
They've invested those one-time monies in capital facilities and equipment to be able to, and there's a little bit of a balloon potential there with equipment. It does only last for so long.
Yeah.
But they've leveraged those one-time monies to invest in those capital improvements or capital equipment that allows our team to really be effective and efficient.
And there's a huge difference between equipment's maintenance schedules. We used to always get we ran Versalifts and High Rangers and stuff like that, which were a little bit more expensive up front, but them suckers just never broke, and they're hardly ever, unless you hit them or damaged them, they just kept going. And then same thing with some of the trucks. We always ran Internationals, that DT 466 engine, which as long as you changed the oil on them, they kept going. And then we had other companies that we worked with, and they would just buy something online that was maintenance nightmares, and things were always in the shop. And so definitely find something with low maintenance. Otherwise, that equipment will never be working when you need to, and it'll be constantly chasing it with some type of maintenance person.
And just to piggyback on that is really listen to the team that's going to be doing the work as you're specifying that equipment.
Yes.
If I would have been drawing the spec for purchasing that on my own, I know they wouldn't have the tool that they have today.
Yeah.
Like they were really specific in ensuring that the vehicle was below CDL requirements, because they didn't want to add that layer of complexity to this operation for this small scale equipment. So that was one. Two, putting an aluminum box so they can maximize the payload capacity of this vehicle, that they weren't taking up every bit of capacity that they had with the equipment that was permanently mounted on the rig. And then three, the actual aerial lift, the way that unit was configured offers them more utility and the ability to get work done efficiently by just very simply ensuring that it had a telescoping function. So they can zoom out into a tree from within. And then the point where the arm attached to the bucket that the human is in was also critical. That point is at the bottom of the bucket, not up by the controls. Because if it's up by the controls, now you've got all of that infrastructure that holds this bucket in the air is right where you need to be to do your work. So by picking that up in the lower, and those are things that I'm not going to know because I haven't worked a loft in a tree. And if we would have invested in that without that sort of information, we would have been working with that unit at less than its potential capacity for 15 years.
Yeah.
And the cost, you think about the cost of operational efficiency over that 15 years, and it gets a little scary. So really having those dialogues with staff as you move through a purchasing process, that you don't just take the easy way out and go to state bid and grab the same thing that everybody else has grabbed. Or
Yes. I'm so glad you're saying this, because I was one of the guys that I probably lived inside of a bucket truck for a decade before I expanded my company out and had many electricians and bucket trucks and stuff like that. But there's stuff you can only understand just by being in the bucket. For instance, having a self-leveling bucket, not having it's unlockable or lockable, or having a material handler. And when you go to state auction, if you've never worked one, a bucket truck's a bucket truck. There's really no difference. But when you work in one for 8 hours a day, you could be, and the thing is, if that bucket truck is yours for a decade or 5 years, and if you buy an inefficiency, that inefficiency shows up every day at work. So if your tree surgeons can put in a full 8 hours versus 7 hours, and the other hours is spent struggling with this piece of equipment that was just not quite the right fit, then you've maybe deleted a man hour every day for 10 years because you just didn't ask the guy that spent 10 years in the bucket what he needed to do his job. I'm so glad you brought that up. I am going to actually ask that type of question for the maintenance show, because it's so important to have frontline information in the purchasing decisions. Much like you ask your people in the community, what kind of trail do they want, or are we building the right thing? It's kind of on that same vein of logic to get that input.
It becomes very nuanced, because there's a lot of opinions when you start to get into the weeds of that sort of thing, and how you specify that in a local government setting or government setting becomes challenging. we're a low bid type purchasing authority. So drawing out all of those specs, you're probably not going to capture everything that the crew has asked you to capture. But hopefully you can get better at that in time, and that most of those things are captured, and they can gather those efficiencies. The other thing with that is reach out to other people in the industry. I've found over my decade plus working in Parks and Rec, we're pretty willing to share what our successes are and what our failures are, and how we arrived at those successes and failures. So, I also sit on our executive board for our state Recreation and Parks Association, and those associations, those state level agencies, really are the pulse of what recreation looks like and how you can operate our organizations in your local state. That's your best resource for networking opportunity. That is invaluable information that you can capture. Build those relationships. Build the relationships with the designers, the other material suppliers, equipment suppliers that are in your industry through those trade shows at those conferences, because those are the relationships that are going to help you write better specs, that are going to help you deliver the products that get the work done for the community to enjoy the spaces that they see every day.
Yeah. And shout out to Ryan Brewer. He was my interviewer yesterday from Durant, Oklahoma, but he had a guy that's retiring next month, 47 years in field maintenance and stuff like that. And he ran one of the big tractors like bush hogs and stuff. And he got over 20 years from 2 tractors. So this man ran 47 years on 2 tractors, and every other piece of equipment in the entire system that they're running was like a 5-year lifespan. And he tried to actually sell his equipment at the 3 and 4 year mark before that big maintenance came in. And then you got this one outlier, one man that just knew what tractor would last long and how to treat it. Like you're saying, Bryan, tap into that wisdom of what it takes to maintain your equipment. Otherwise, you might have got a piece of equipment for a few thousand cheaper, but you're having to buy it every 4 years versus one that could last 10 years if you knew exactly what to buy and also how to treat it. That's another big thing is, you can abuse your equipment and destroy anything you get. Okay. So, oh my gosh, how are we at 55 minutes already? I wanted to go a little bit more into, okay, tell us a little bit about, maybe we'll just touch on it. We'll save the rest of this for the maintenance show, but about managing wildfire, fire risk management, cost, prepping for fires. I know, because that was a big topic not too long ago and something you got to consider when managing.
That might be a whole topic all to itself. No. So we can at least give it a little primer here. Right. So 2023, midsummer for us, we had a dry summer 23. There was wildfire that had expanded to well over 50,000 acres in a neighboring forest environment, probably 15 miles away from us. We have a small little local regional airport that response was being based out of for the Forest Service. And we had a fire in that 500 acre community forest site that I mentioned. So things start clicking off really quick in that environment. The call came in from our park aide that sits in a ticket booth collecting fees for people to park in the park.
Oh, nice.
To go picnic and everything. So they literally called up our operations maintenance office and said, somebody just reported a fire. It's like, hang up the phone and call 911. Like, we're not the first line of defense for a fire.
Right. Right.
But it's their supervisor, right? Like that's the relationship that's there. And so that triggered the response. And due to the fact that this fire occurred in the close proximity of lots of private structures, there were a lot of potential threats to structures that were nearby. We did have some pretty high winds that day. We were in the 15 to 20 mile an hour winds, nothing like what California has recently experienced in the LA's fire with the Santa Ana winds pushing well over 50 miles an hour. But it was driving winds enough that created a canopy crown fire.
Mhm.
And that fire ended up being able, because of the proximity of the other fires that were going on in the environment that have fewer structure threats, they were able to pull those resources to our fire. And we had, within hours, we had 4 separate ground crews that were on the ground, and they had, I believe, 12 different aerial resources that were working that fire.
Wow.
And some of the challenges that they faced because they're in the urban setting, people flying drones, trying to get pictures of this aerial show that was going on. 2 different times they had to ground the helicopter that was pulling water out of the river to go respond to this fire. And you know, those are big threats that slow down that whole operation. But they were able to get things under control in about 48 hours and fully surround the fire and work towards putting that out. So then, you know, they at that point, fire is out, it's mostly contained. There's still burning that's occurring on the interior of this perimeter that they then created. And so us as a parks agency, we've got to determine how are we going to handle this facility for the community, what closures are going to have to exist, what do those look like. So layering on those initial response challenges and risk management discussions occurred. And then the long-term challenges that post-fire environment resulted in. And it really opened up a discussion for us and larger than us at the county level. And we were then able to leverage some additional maintenance pruning forest treatments to reduce the potential for wildfire expansion beyond our park boundary by doing some fuel treatments along the perimeter of that forest area, and some treatments within the burned area that didn't fully completely burn the underbrush. And basically what we were trying to do with those treatments is create a gap between what the ground fire would create and what a canopy fire would create. So trying to get 10 to 15 feet of vegetation gap between the ground elements. And if you have massive winds, it's going to push up into that canopy, and there's not a lot you can do. Topography plays a factor, and working with a local forester, we were able to write some prescription, able to leverage some FEMA grant dollars that were administered through our county to go out and treat additional acreage in that community forest area. And that's going to be an ongoing operation for us to continue to maintain those treatments, as well as further expand those treatments to the rest of that community area. Because reality is we're in a space that is active. There are humans that are going to be there. Nearby recreation is the place where folks learn leave no trace principles and how to interact with forest environments that expand beyond in the federal area. We have the infrastructure to handle more volume of folks with our parking facilities. Our community forest sits just a couple of miles away, or no, not even a couple of miles, a couple hundred yards away from our city center. So it's a short walk to jump into this forest from areas that can handle large volumes of population. You don't have that in a Forest Service trailhead that has a small little pit toilet that can handle 15 cars along the side of a gravel road. We can handle some volume of people. So trying to build an environment that helps leverage the volume of humans in a durable or a semi-durable way that helpfully reduces the potential for threats to expand to the neighboring community is a heavy responsibility that we carry. So
now I'd like to and I think we're in a group chat on LinkedIn with some of the designers and stuff, but I'd like to, maybe you can bring your urban forestry master or anyone else that you have, and we do a whole panel just on, we could probably do one just on fire risk management, and then also on urban forestry. I think that might be a lot of content to cram both of those into one episode. But I think this is a topic that now, it seems like we forget about it until California's burning, and then we're like, then we think about it, and then we forget about it. And it's like we have to have this crisis to remind us that you could have a massive potential risk on your hands if you don't kind of think about it as a city. long term.
Yeah,
So
there's the International Society of Arboriculture, ISA. They're adding another qualification similar to that tree risk assessment qualification that's trying to empower field workers that are working for private property owners to not just treat the forest environment surrounding their home, because it's likely what they're called out to do, but also to look at their structures and how do they prepare those structures for the threat of wildfire. How do you what changes do you might need to make to your actual building? Is what they're finding is these massive urban fires that are resulting in oftentimes they're wood decks that are attached to their structure, that's what catches on fire and then torches the house.
right.
Their vinyl fence that attaches from house to house, and it's as simple as just having no vegetation in the 4 to 8 feet zone surrounding the house, and
Right.
changing the equipment that exists within your soffit and your crawl space that doesn't allow for embers to make their way into those spaces and then catch your structure on fire.
Right.
Those are the subtle changes that this secondary qualification is aiming to inform contractors of how do they help out their customer.
Right.
And where my urban forester also sits in that qualification education arm regionally here in the Pacific Northwest, and trying to really structure that for how does that play out in our wetter, more temperate forest environment versus what California has. These were originally built for that California, Texas, Arizona type environment. So how does that become just changed slightly to fit the environment of Oregon, Washington, California, or Northern California, Idaho, Montana, because our forest is dramatically different where it interfaces in that wildland urban interface.
Yeah. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate your time and what you're doing for your community and all these different areas of expertise that you've kind of added to your base of knowledge to run a park system. But thanks for coming, and I'm definitely wanting to get you and maybe some other people you could recommend to maybe do an urban forestry and fire prevention segment on the maintenance show at 11 a.m. Monday through Thursday. So we're looking at some good content like this that we can create.
But look forward to it. And thank you for having me on, and congratulations again on that 100th episode. So.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everybody for kind of contributing. And if it weren't for guys like you coming on, sharing your story, it would just be me up here talking, probably wouldn't even have a show. So thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yep. Take care, Ryan. All right. So that was Bryan Myers over at City of Post Falls, Idaho. What a wealth of knowledge he brings to his city. And I think it's so common in parks and recreation for men like him, men and women like him, to see what their city needs, pulling from their past, maybe even pursuing degrees and certifications that, and a lot of this is, I don't want to say it's on a volunteer basis, but people are seeing the need in leadership, and they're like, I need to go get that certification for my city, as just because I know they'll benefit from it. And then they go out and get masters and PhDs and certifications because their city just needs it. And so they're kind of tooling up. But then I also like how Bryan talked about reaching out to the masters, talking to the guys on the front line, getting information and wisdom that only decades of working, on the front line of a bucket truck or on a piece of machinery or a neighboring town that has like a master arborist that you can kind of pick their brain a little bit. And so I think that is a great skill set to have in Parks and Rec. And so many Parks and Rec people in leadership and directors are very good at networking and collaborating, so they can leverage wisdom at pennies on the dollar, if not for free, from neighboring communities. And I think that's why it's important for you to attend your state and national conventions, because you have got all levels of mastery walking all around you for days when you attend these. And you can run into a guy like Bryan and strike up a conversation only to realize you're talking to somebody that has a high degree of mastery around urban forestry, arborists, fire management, that kind of stuff. And your city maybe has no one on staff similar to him. And so he's able to kind of open up his network of of advisors that he's tapped into, and then maybe even give you some game plans or master plans that they have, and they'd be happy to just email it to you. So I think that is kind of the reason why we're putting this show on as well, because we don't want all that wisdom in Bryan's head to just stay up in Idaho. We want to share it with the rest of the world. And then I know he has masters that he's leaned on that maybe we can get on the show and share that wisdom and create a content library for all things Parks and Rec. That's why I think it's really important that we do our job and push into this maintenance show, because we're starting to see that even in the leaders themselves, even the directors, like in Bryan's case, they have a lot of wisdom that kind of goes into the rest of their organization. But what you'll see is that inside, as you get deeper into their organization, they have these master craftsmen that are working decades on maintaining fields, maintaining forestry, maintaining aquatic centers. That's where a lot of that deep wisdom lives. Whereas somebody like Bryan will come and touch on these different topics or these different industries, but beneath him, in his staff, he's got masters that literally dedicate their entire career to just irrigation or maintaining urban forestry or maintaining an aquatic center or something, where this is what they do literally all the time. And so I think it's really important to create a show that highlights that depth of knowledge, and we kind of get little glimpses of it at the leadership level. But I want to go deeper into the community, and let's go talk to the master craftsmen. Let's talk shop. Let's talk to these people that have a high degree of knowledge, and we can share that with the whole United States of America park system and even further. So appreciate everybody that's come onto the show. Can't believe it's already been 100 episodes. We've got a great show scheduled. Tomorrow is our second YPN. Shout out to Chad Norton, who is going to kind of help me organize this along with a great team of YPN organizers and leaders. Shout out to Molly and Gabby. And oh gosh, we've got a whole list of growing people. So if you are a young professional, especially if you're in college right now for Parks and Recreation, we want you to come on the show and tell us what you're learning. If you're a professor that's teaching, we want you to come on that show and tell us what you're teaching. If you are an emerging professional, meaning you came from, let's just say, landscape architecture like Bryan, but you've never done it in Parks and Rec, and this is like your first year or two in Parks and Rec, then this show is for you. If you'd like to volunteer and help us to organize this show, we're looking for organizers from content to just helping us connect with young professionals or college kids that would like to come on the show. Every Friday, we got 52 shows a year. If we're doing, that's 52 weeks out of the year, Fridays, there's 52 Fridays a year. And it's a 1-hour show, and we want 4 people. Well, I guess I'm going to be there on every show. So me, a mentor, somebody like Chad, and then also 2 young professionals or 2 emerging professionals. So we have kind of like a panel of 4. And so we're developing this show and the content that goes into it real time right now. And that's already launched. So tomorrow is our second show for that one. That'll be our 101st episode. And then, as you hear me talking about a lot, you see the need for the Daily Parks and Rec show to have an 11 a.m. show all about maintaining facilities, maintaining park systems, maintaining trails, maintaining urban forestry, maintaining, you name it. Maintenance is a massive effort. It consumes a lot of your park dollars. A chunk of your man hours that are going into Parks and Rec is just to maintain this massive real estate portfolio. And it's not just parks. It's not just the community center. It's trails. And listen to everything Bryan just said about the volume of work it takes to maintain 18,000 trees every 2 to 5 years, visiting them. And so that all falls under Parks and Recreation. And as we start to peel back the onion of what is Parks and Recreation, we also want to talk about what it takes to maintain it. And lastly, our Friday show at 11 a.m. is right before our YPN is going to be all about finances. And when I say finances, financial sustainability. How do we keep our parks from going bankrupt? And how do we find our parks into bankruptcy? What does a park heading into bankruptcy look like? What are the red flags we need to be identifying? What does a healthy park system look like financially? What does an under control deferred maintenance program look like? What does an out of control deferred maintenance program look like? Let's get the accountants, the spreadsheets, the bean counters, the people who can turn around the financial culture. Let's get them some space to speak and to share. How do we make sure that the financial future of our park systems is bright and robust and strong, and not to make sure that we're not building park systems that are literally going to be crushed by the financial debt from either a tax revenue disappears, or perhaps we're not including maintenance for all this stuff that we're building right now. So imagine we have like a huge run up, lots of money. We build all kind of stuff, zero budget for maintenance. So we're creating a problem 20 years down the road that could crush the next director that takes your place. And so we want to make sure that we're getting ahead of that. We're going to create a whole show on it from 11 to 12 on Fridays. That should be launching around the same time as the maintenance show. So we're still trying to do all this pretty well. It's pretty chaotic back here. If you'd like to support, as a matter of fact, I encourage every one of you to support. Currently, our burn rate is about $482, I think, per show. That means we spend $482 for every single show we create. That's all the team players, all the softwares, all the costs and expenses to run the Daily Parks and Rec show. So if you'd like to contribute in any way, you can either buy this LED light right here, hire us as a social media manager, or just contribute. We would love to create something for you or your community. And again, we just need to, currently I'm funding this myself, along with some other people that are kind of helping me out. Shout out to Outdoor Link. They've come on as a great sponsor to take on a chunk of us. If you want to control your LED lights or anything else with the flip of a switch on a cell phone on a very simple app, you can turn your stadium lights on and off, trail lights on and off, baseball field lights. You can lock doors in bathrooms just through an app on your phone that you can then give to maintenance professionals or coaches or your director. Now, instead of that phone call at Sunday from a neighbor that the lights in the baseball field next to my house have been left on and having to pay overtime for somebody to go out there and turn that off, it's literally just flip on a switch. Switch on your cell phone app. Super elegant application. And I think they start at like $900 for this, a year's worth of subscription. Other programs I've seen like this are $5,000 to $7,000 for the exact same component. And Outdoor Link has already deployed 80,000 of these units for Lamar and a growing number of park systems throughout America. So great company. I've worked with them when I was building my LED light company before I decided to become a YouTuber, or whatever you classify myself as doing right now. I'm building this media company. But they came on as a sponsor for the show. Really appreciate that. If there's anyone else that would like to sponsor the show, whether you're selling lawnmowers, I know this maintenance part of our show is going to speak a lot to that audience, but we'd love to help expand the show. We want to grow it. We've got a lot more talent we got to acquire if we're going to keep this thing going. So appreciate everybody coming on, sticking with us for 100 straight episodes. Looking forward to 101st episode tomorrow for our YPN. Bryan, thank you so much for coming and share your wisdom with us. Really appreciate all the work you're doing, and I hope that we can maybe create some really good content down the road. So love you guys. See y'all tomorrow. Bye.
When you invest in our high-performance LED sports arena lights, you're not just upgrading your facilities, you're helping us illuminate the untold stories of parks and recreation communities. Every purchase directly supports the Daily Parks and Rec Show, a media platform on a mission to celebrate the heart and soul of our local parks and programs. From after-school activities to summer leagues, these spaces shape lives, and their stories deserve to be told. Why your support matters. Capturing community impact. Your contribution helps us assemble a talented team of digital artists, storytellers, and filmmakers to create compelling videos, articles, and short films that spotlight how Parks and Rec programs change lives. Sharing untold stories. From a child's first home run to lifelong friendships forged on the court, we'll document these priceless moments and share them with the world. Inspiring the next generation by highlighting the joy, inclusivity, and opportunities found in our parks, we foster a deeper appreciation for these vital community spaces. Light up arenas, brighten futures. Your choice to install LED sports arena lights isn't just a smart investment in energy efficiency and performance, it's an investment in stories that deserve to be told. Be part of the story. Take action today. Purchase LED sports arena lights and help us shine a spotlight on the heartwarming stories that define our parks and communities. Contact us now to learn more about our products and how your support fuels the Daily Parks and Rec Show. Together, we'll shine a light on the moments that matter most.